Now that's how you do an opening.
Ladies and hi everybody, welcome to Fanturms, where we're going to be complaining a lot about people who complain about the complaining that happens when complaining needs to happen.
And the complainers.
Yes. And the complainers who love them.
Complaintception!
At each other. So, right off the bat, we're going to be talking about the relationship that exists between game developers, game companies, and the fans of games and franchises. And to begin, we're going to start with our esteemed panel of experts. Right over here, our lovely, just introduce yourself, damn it.
Hi, I'm Bob Schweizer. I do a bunch of these things. I also co-host the Low Score podcast, lowscorepodcast.blogspot.com.
Yay! Robert Clare, too.
3 weeks.
Out of the year? Out of the year?
I am Magfest of Extract Studios, and I am host of Extract Studios Triple Radio. It's kind of.
I'm Rory O'Boyle of Extract Studios. I host nothing, I make the blood.
Some of you were at panels earlier today that I was on, Super Life NPCs and Are There Too Many Games? This is hopefully the last time you'll ever have to hear my voice.
I mean, yeah.
No, I don't know.
Oh, come on, really? You're not going to spoil it. No. Okay. My name is Robert V. Aldrich. I am an author and novelist, and at the moment I have no projects that are publicly available. My first book since 2009, and my 6th novel should be out in June. Should be kind of awesome. Okay, so here's what I want. We're going to begin. I want to throw a question out to our panelists. I want to begin with, do you believe fans have any, as far as nebulous as you want to take it, have any ownership of franchises?
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
Maybe.
Santa Claus. Ava is too.
Ava is too.
Doesn't matter. We're not.
Okay.
I believe fans have no inherent right, but that the creators have a right to take the feelings of fans into account even if they don't listen to them. Mm-hmm. Which is to say that I think that the creators of games and film franchises, etc., have some kind of ethical responsibility to think about, well, there are people who are really invested in this, and what would they think if we did this? But they don't necessarily have to do the thing that they think would please the most people, but I just would hope that they would take that into account somehow.
Okay. I think it behooves the creator of any property to bear in mind what their audience's response to their product is going to be, and not just assume that because you're putting hard work into it, it's going to be loved and awesome. That you should actually kind of try to put yourself in their shoes and interpret it from their perspective. And I think there is a responsibility on part of creators in that way to grant some degree of influence to fans in that way.
I think that, you know, of course, there should be a bit of symbiosis in the relationship, but I think that fan bases can't get too entitled. They have to realize that they may have some ownership of a product. They're not like the first owner of a product. Like, I think especially with the hoopla that is going to happen when the new Star Wars movies come out, and that there was, you know, sort of established books of what comes after episodes 4, 5, and 6, and that these movies may not follow what those books did. And that doesn't make what the movies do less legitimate, or the books necessarily. But you just have to be willing to accept that things might be different from the way you want them to be, and that doesn't make them bad.
Oh, yeah, and I agree with him on that. So the fans have, or the creators have a right over like the properties and the things that they're going to produce, but then the fans should also have some sort of right to the property in like a secondary sense. So the idea of like writing fan fiction or something, like that is a way that you, as a person who's interested in a franchise or genre or whatever, can further those things that you like about it, as opposed to petitioning someone to petitioning the original creator to make something the way you want it.
We're out.
Okay, so then, hypothetical scenario, you have, let's say, a really popular video game franchise. And the first two games were hugely successful. But then the third game comes out with a lot of hoopla and a lot of excitement. But then, let's say, some aspect of it, like the ending.
Do you have an example?
Are we talking about in a situation where everything up to the ending is great?
Yeah, why don't we go with that? For our hypothetical example, everything up until the ending is great. What do you feel is the appropriate response to the fans' indignation? If you were the combined voice of the fans, what do you think would be appropriate? So we're going to start in
The response of the
let's do alphabetical order. Bobby.
Yeah.
The response of the fans, or the response to the feelings of the fans?
The response of the fans. We'll do the feeling, the response to the fans in a second.
And
So,
eventually we'll hug.
yes. Not each other. Just weird.
I think the mere fact, the mere idea of complaining about something or having feelings about the way something like that turns out, the poor ending or whatever, and voicing that dissatisfaction, say, on the internet, I think that's kind of where it should stop. Like you've put it out there and you said, like, I'm not happy with the way this has gone, but as a fan, I don't know that I should expect them to do something about it.
So I have a real answer and a joke answer. And I'll do the kind of jokier answer first. I would love a scenario where fans are outraged and are disgusted on the internet, and BioWare doesn't listen. But then fans organize an old-fashioned letter-writing campaign where they physically mail letters, and it's only after the physical mail arrives that they listen. So I would love some sort of jokey scenario where, like, oh, internet disgust means nothing, but you took the time to write me a nice letter, and you put it on your letterhead, and you signed it, and you sealed it with the wax seal.
Yeah.
Then I can understand them doing something.
What if we went one step further and it was like smoke signals, so they like blotted out?
Smoke signals. You hired somebody to deliver the message.
Send a telegram.
Sending a telegram. Any of those things. That's the joke answer, but I'm also kind of serious. But I guess the answer is, I think the internet is the perfect platform for people to be disgusted on, but you don't necessarily have to read it. Like, you can kind of just, it's like yelling into an echo chamber sometimes. Like, you're adding to a kind of level of disgust. I don't have much of an opinion though.
Okay. Rory?
There's kind of a weird cumulative quality to especially internet-based rage. Like, and I don't know if it's because in a discussion, face-to-face, you say your piece and the words are gone, but like, when something's on the internet, it's there forever. And it's almost like the internet's like this big sluice that just catches all this hatred and builds up and builds up. And the result is like people, I feel like, become influenced by what they're seeing to the point of predisposition and like, oh, well, I heard that there's something really awful about this scenario, hypothetically, and you experience it, you're already looking at it through the position of like a tainted opinion, and you're much more likely to join in the din because you're like, yeah, that's right, it did make me mad, that hypothetical situation. And then you keep adding, perpetuating the process.
Yeah, I'm going to go out of order.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree with Rory and say that you may have thought about, like, oh, I didn't like that ending, and you wouldn't have thought anything else about it before. And then as soon as you see someone else saying it, then you want to engage in that conversation.
Okay.
My feeling is that, like specifically, yeah, like if this hypothetical trilogy had happened in an era before the internet, you wouldn't have seen or really heard this blowback that we did, because it's just, we're talking about Mass Effect, by the way.
What?
lot of the complaints I saw was just like, oh, every ending is the same. It's just that the colors are different. That's it. Or they're like, ha ha, I'm colorblind. All the endings were the same. They're so clever. But like, so they're like, you know.
They also don't understand how colorblindness works.
Deets. But it's just like, you know, we live in an era where it's like, back then it would be like, if you finished a game in, you know, 1992, one, good on you, because the games were harder back then, I feel like, generally speaking. But it's like, you would go and talk to like your one or two other friends that played that game.
Two friends.
Yeah. That had that game. You had more friends, but they played other games, or they're poor. And they couldn't afford it right away. But it's here, it's like, I finished the game. I'm going to go on the internet. I'm going to talk to hundreds and thousands of people, and I'm going to go onto YouTube and watch all of the other endings, like right away, and be like, why isn't this, you know, just like, you know, out of context of everything else that happened in the game. And then that is, but just, that perpetuates it.
I have an opinion and it's going to be heard.
Yeah.
Well, let me counter that then. We're going to step slightly out of video games for a second here.
Sounds good.
I want to talk about a franchise that's near and dear to my heart, which is the Transformers franchise. The Transformers franchise had two huge strikes against it as far as the popularity amongst its fans, its core fans, which was the live-action movie directed by Michael Bay, and the animated series called Transformers Animated, which was not popularly received by the fans, but was generally very successful. And Transformers Prime, the current series now, is a little bit more light, but it's not seeing a lot of popularity as well because many of the fans are wanting Gen 1.
What? As they always do.
Yeah.
Beast Wars was better.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use the word better, but it was good.
What do you think? Let's assume that you create a product that receives revilation from its fans, but let's say hypothetically a reasonable revilation. What do you think is the optimal scenario for the creators, or at least the owners of the IP, to respond to the anger and the animosity? Again, assuming it was a reasonable level, whatever that happens to be in your eyes. What do you think would be the appropriate response from the creators of the IP?
Listen.
So there's, I can think of a couple, and they're all pretty different in intention and what happens. So one would be ignore it and try something new. So, you know, you realize that people don't like this thing that you've done, you end it, it's over, then you try something new the next time. One would be reboot, where, which is I think where a lot of franchises go now. When something doesn't quite work, you know, when something doesn't quite work, you sort of, you instantly announce plans to kind of wholly reconceptualize whatever thing it was, the whole film, whatever it is. I prefer the just stop and move on, because I'm interested to see where they go next. But there's a baby in a dragon house.
Stop here for a second. On three, I want to take all. 1, 2, 3. Because really, that thing is adorable.
It's got a 10.
I lost my train of thought. That's all I have. Stop and move on.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Who was it?
I think the most appropriate response from the creator standpoint is this going to hurt me commercially? And if the answer is yes, then maybe you listen to what the fans' feedback is, because that's your focus group. And if the answer is no, like Michael Bay, then you do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, money talks. So it's just like, in the Transformers example, like, with Transformers Animated specifically, like, arguably the target audience for that show is not people who, they're children who don't get on the internet to complain about things. You know, not adults who act like children who go on the internet to complain about things. So it's like if kids watch the show and kids go and buy the toys, then it's working. And, you know, it's unfortunate that there's, you know, part of the fan base that's unhappy, but you have to keep growing because eventually people die and then you won't have fans.
So yeah, like at that point,
I'm sorry.
the intended audience of Transformers anime isn't the people that grew up with Transformers in the 80s. They may, be swept up in it as a newer iteration of a product they enjoy. But from a marketing standpoint, you're trying to get a new audience with a new product. And I think in the case of whoever's making Transformers these days, they are, they're concerned with numbers, they're concerned with sales. If your purpose for creating something is for the sake of yourself and it's a passion project, I think at that point you're really only answerable to yourself. If your creation is meant to be shared and enjoyed, you at least have a responsibility to listen to why it's resonating or dissonating with your audience.
Michael Williams, a noted fantasy author, a wonderful quote, which was, as an artist, you perpetually try to strike the balance between refusal to compromise and eagerness to include. And it sounds like what we're hearing here is you have a fluctuation on which side of the spectrum you want to be on. All right, so we're going to take a second here. Do we have any questions so far? Yes?
Me?
Yes.
Honestly,
What's your question?
I just want to ask this question. Do you think that, y'all talk about fans of the ownership or secondary ownership of it, but do you think that even if you are creating content, do you have to really think about the fans and such? Like, how to think about the fans and try not to make sure to mitigate these things. Like, what they did with Mass Effect 3 is the ending. In some cases, some say that it's worse because all you're doing is, like, you're trying to make it up while you're just like, oh, well, you should have done this the first time, or, or just the fans are just pissed off the secondary endings to begin with. So it's just a lost type of opportunity and everything.
And I understand your question that you're asking, do our panelists believe that the creators should pay attention to the fans as they're creating something? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, somewhat, yes.
Like how much pandering is too much pandering?
Yeah, too much.
In that case, the worst case scenario for me to see is when a creator has something that's not well received and they redact what they've done. And had they gone in and created an entirely new ending for the hypothetical story, I would have then, as a fan who had experienced it and my primary experience with the game had been concluded, would then not feel like this product was valid because it wasn't there originally. I think it changed it. I don't think that there's a responsibility to pander to that degree, but I don't mind there being a response that doesn't negate the people who might have been happy with the product in the first place.
So that's raises a good point. What's the complication that arises when you've gone back and you changed something, redacted? Like, when you're doing your Game of the Year list, if you're a website, which version of Mass Effect 3 are you giving Game of the Year to? Or is that on your list? Is it the one that came out on the disc, or is it the one that came out with all the DLC attached to it and the changed ending attached to it? How do you even know which of those is like a proper Mass Effect 3?
Well, I like the model with film. This happens more with some games. It happens of letting there be an initial release version of something and then a director's cut or a producer's cut. And the great example is Blade Runner, right? You can get a suitcase that has 5 different versions of Blade Runner. It doesn't kill what is essentially Blade Runner. It just means that you can choose from the various versions the one that gives you the sort of best experience. And I think the main difference, though, is that with Mass Effect, the investment of hours into Mass Effect 3 is greater than watching Blade Runner 5 times in a row, right? So it has to do something with just the amount of time you spend making it.
I just want to say, like, Mass Effect 3 came out, like, the middle of March. By the end of March, like, there was no fixing it, like, from BioWare's perspective, because no matter what, they were going to make somebody angry or not change their mind at all. Like,
Interesting. Yeah. All right, so everything yes, you've got a question? No, we'll come back there, yes.
I was just wondering, from a fan's point of view, you've got this instance of Mass Effect 3 where the fans love it coming up to this ending, and then everything goes wrong and it's terrible. How are the fans supposed to get involved so their voices can be heard before the mistake is made?
Well, I think they do that all the time. So if you have a game that's a trilogy, or you know you're going to release a sequel, people are talking about it all times. It's not just, you know, when something gets released. You have all this material to look back on.
It just seems like the sluice you were talking about, where all this negativity gets caught up, kind of, I guess, overrides positiveness.
But you have to look, I mean, you see all the negativity, but you can look for the positive stuff just as well.
And I mean, in the case of film, you get test screenings, and that often dictates how a movie is going to be finished. A lot gets changed between the initial cut and the final release of a movie based on audiences and their reactions. Again, because it's monetarily driven, and they want to make a movie that's going to sell the most tickets. I am not, I don't know what degree games go through that same sort of process in terms of like betaing or some sort of, I mean, I guess that's just quality control in general at that point. But it's probably not as wide of an audience as you get with test screenings where they do it in like 6 different cities, you know, that many times with a couple hundred seats, each one of them filling out a comment card. So you're probably not getting as much feedback.
Yeah, QA, you know, the people who are doing QA aren't going to tell you their feelings on the game. They're just telling you what's broken. And in a lot of ways, betas are the same thing. They're just trying to balance systems in the game, not figure out what people like.
And story is still very secondary in a lot of game productions. So you have someone who's looking for glitches. You have someone who's looking for the game, for where the game totally breaks. They're not going in there to judge, I think this content's getting a little spacey, you know, with characters.
Another sort of difference is if your audience doesn't like an ending in a test screening, you can either quickly recut it, you can cut it earlier, or you can shoot a quick ending. Whereas changing the ending to something like a Mass Effect game requires a lot more work and a lot sort of more investment in a whole different set of things. So film, in a sense, becomes more flexible there. I mean, still not easy.
Yes, sir, you were waiting. Yes.
Yeah. Do you feel the dynamic between fans and developers is different if it's a property that's been licensed from a developer that created it and sort of built it up to another developer that sort of makes like an off-sequel? Case in point, the Silent Hill series. After the numbered installments, it was licensed out to Vatra and Double Helix from 2 of the studios. So do you feel that, you know, the ownership dynamic is different if there's a studio who is sort of given the license and the fans who feel attached to the license?
I think in the case of this hypothetical series, fans are very, they're very wary of title change when it comes to studio. So initially, anything that's wrong with the game is going to be, oh, this Vatra sucks or Double Helix sucks, and it should have been Team Silent. Why aren't they making this game anymore? Why aren't they making the same game they made 6 years ago? Because I want to play that one again. And like,
That's kind of the problem.
that is part of the problem there. Like, people a lot of the times expect more of the same. So when you inject fresh blood in the case of the studio change, you get fresh perspective. You get, in the case of Silent Hill Homecoming, like, this was a game that was very much made by Silent Hill fans, but didn't necessarily understand the process that worked previously. They looked at the aesthetic qualities and they're like, this is what we thought was cool, let's mash it all into one game. Whereas Downpour, they really wanted to go out of their way to create an entirely new experience. In both cases, they met with a lot of mixed reactions from fans because it was either doing too much of the same thing or doing too much differently, and in both cases they're just pointing the finger at these new studios being like, fuck you, what's wrong with you? Why can't you make the games like the old guys? So I think it's a damning situation. I think it's really hard for a new studio to come in and pick up, like, in the case of like Ninja Theory and DMC, panned to hell off of one teaser trailer that showed no gameplay. And over the last year and a half, they've been having to kind of win back their intended audience until they finally released a demo of what looks to be a pretty good Devil May Cry game. I personally really like it. So, like, it sucks that people are so snap judgmental when it comes to ownership changes, because you could be getting something new and different, and you should be excited about change because that's what keeps franchises alive and legitimate.
And here's the thing, you can still play Silent Hills 1 and 2. It's not like those have gone away somehow.
That's not entirely true.
Well,
Because you can't get some of these games. Like, as much as I want, I will never, if I sell 100 gallons of blood, I will never be able to afford Vagrant Story. And so you're going to have issues with accessibility. But
yeah, it's like $6.99.
Is your blood really cheap?
I'm right. There's a point here, Rory, that I want to follow up on, and that is, should fans be encouraging of change? Try to think of a good example. Even if they don't like the change, do you think the fans of different franchises should be more vocal about it? Probably a really good example was from the Simon Belmont's Legacy panel yesterday.
Yeah.
We talked very briefly about Castlevania Judgment, which was a one-on-one fighting game. It was terrible. But do you think fans should still be encouraging of that and be all like, yeah, this sucked ass, but good job for the try? Do you think they should, or do you think they should just be brutally honest so long as it doesn't involve a lawsuit?
I think being accepting of new and different things is important from a fan perspective, because that's the only way what you love is going to grow and get bigger than, you know, what exists right now. It's like, you might as well, I'm sure, you know, for a while people were like, oh, wouldn't it be so cool if there was a Castlevania fighting game?
I've been saying this for years.
Nobody says that anymore.
I did say that before Judgment.
I feel like the opposite way. So, or I feel about the Pokemon series. No, the Pokemon series is like a series that it needs to change. It desperately needs to change because all they've done is remade the same game over and over. And I played a handful of them, but that's enough. Like I've experienced Blue, I played Black, or whatever. But I want them to do something different because that's exciting. So.
But that's not going to happen because the fans don't want it to change, and you like what some of the panelists said, that they just don't want. They want the same game over and over again.
And I'm not an audience either. It's like Tim was saying, the audience is different.
Maybe they could do a reboot like Bomberman.
Back zero. Realistic.
Pokemon Zero.
Good question. You've been waiting really patiently doing that. Yes, you.
Again, going back to the whole Mass Effect 3 debacle and the retake movement, which I still thought was fucking stupid, but that's not
It's not 9 o'clock yet.
Sorry.
Oh, he already dropped that bomb.
Oh, did he?
Am I not allowed to?
I wasn't paying attention.
I did too. Is this a problem?
I didn't think you were allowed to like go the full 7 words you can't say on television until like after 9 or something.
There's a baby out there.
Yeah.
Someone should really save that baby.
How many of you have seen the personal ad that's been going around online recently about the I want somebody to go slay the red dragon in this area, not the green dragon, so we have a relation. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I just had to quick poll. But yeah.
Anyways.
In any event, so sorry, I apologize, but still, initially when there was a lot of backlash about the whole ending and whatnot, there was a brief talk about, what was it called, creative integrity or something like that, whereas should BioWare actually change the ending or should they leave it as is for the sake of keeping the rest of the game, for the sake of,
yeah.
It's there, it's already done, so, and pretty much, like, if we were to change it, no, excuse me, wrong perspective. Some others, like myself, from the outside, looking in, we're going like, if BioWare were to change it, then some of us thought that they would be essentially surrendering their own creativity for the sake of damage control. Right. So, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I like to put my faith. I put my faith in developers because they're professionals. They're doing something I don't know how to do. That includes both the nuts and bolts of the game and telling the type of story they're telling. Like, I don't know, I wouldn't be able to write that kind of story even if the ending doesn't please everybody. So I want that to be the thing that I take as work, you know, as gospel work. And I feel like it is kind of a you know, once they do that, what else will they, you know,
Pill time.
Once they surrender that, what else will they take back? You know, what else should I not believe in that they've already given us? So I kind of like to let things just be as they are and then move on. That's kind of the position I'm coming to.
Do you believe that that reaction is about as bad as it can get? Do you think that
The Mass Effect 3 one?
Yeah, that saying, all right, fine, we'll change the ending. Do you believe Lucasing the game was?
The distinction I'll make is what BioWare offered was an optional expansion to the ending. They didn't change anything as that happened. Whereas Lucasing is not only changing elements of the original films, it's also making an attempt to make the original prints less, if not totally, inaccessible. And like, to me, that's the big difference. It's like, you can still play the unaltered version of Mass Effect if you choose. It's a lot harder to get the original trilogy, especially, you know, when new formats come along. It's a very big concession for Lucasfilms to release them. So I think the worst case scenario is when there's an erasure of the original content for the purpose of changing something to please people.
Okay. All right. Well, you there in the back, sir. You have been waiting very patiently. Yes, you had a question.
Well, yeah. Well, to build on what he was just saying about the creative integrity argument, I've been racking my brain here trying to think of a series like Mass Effect, insofar as it's an ongoing thing that was very well, like with continuity of creative team that was very well received until the final installment.
Xenosaga.
I never played that.
Oh, there isn't. Well, you know Xenosaga? I'm sorry, yeah, keep going, sorry.
Especially on that kind of scale, those games were massive successes. Just because I feel like the Mass Effect example in particular, as a lot of the behind-the-scenes information started to come out, it kind of falls apart as a general example because it seems like sort of a creative integrity situation taken to an extreme.
Okay.
When you look at like everything written in Mass Effect 3 was workshopped among the creative staff, among the head end.
What's your question, sir?
I'm wondering where editorial control comes into play.
Okay.
When the ending was specifically not subjected to editorial control, written as a black box by the head writers and no one else saw it.
Okay, so if I'm understanding your question correctly, who do you think should have final say? What's the question?
Can I answer a different question?
Apparently.
The first, I want to talk about the first part of your question, which is you brought up the idea that one of the reasons that there was such a huge backlash to Mass Effect is that that series has spanned most of the lifespan of the 360. It has been like the major epic, and it was really well received. And so for BioWare to try to come up with any endgame to that series, like how could they account for the amount of possible endings, especially in a game that's supposed to be open-ended, unless they did what they did, where they kind of funneled everything back in. So it seems like they were in a totally like a lose-lose situation.
Also point out, every one of those games ends with a specific choice that only marginally alters the close of the game. In 2, you choose one of 2 options, and the fire that blows up the collector base is either green or yellow. Spoiler. It's like, this isn't like a new thing in that series, but people were so expectant of what was going to be the result of their choices having the impact on the final ending. In terms of editorial control, I think that the creator has the privilege of doing that to a degree. I mean, like, when you have, for example, like, I don't want to bring this up in front of a room full of people, but when you have someone like, for example, M. Night, who is writer, director, editor, producer,
actor,
sort of.
He's on screen.
Yeah, he says words. Like, he controls everything, and I'm always wary of a writer directing their own movie, because there's a lot of times there's just not enough reining in.
You do that though.
My movies cost
We're all there.
Like when you have millions and millions of dollars behind a project.
I know you respond to that for a second. Yeah, but when M. Night Shyamalan does it, when somebody has an issue with it, they have to pull him aside and like, oh, come on, let's talk. We need to. If you guys do it, one of you just punches them in the chest. Like this sucks. Oh, it's okay. Sorry.
I just want to say, like, the whole situation that happened with Mass Effect was a very unique firestorm of circumstances, and there's some things, I mean, I'm sure BioWare expected, oh yeah, there's going to be some people that didn't like the ending. I just don't think they expected as many people who didn't like it as they got.
And part of it is that we do live in an era where we can make changes to games after the game is released, where we do have
mods,
DLCs, and title updates and stuff. So I think that being this specifically far into the Xbox 360's life is when people are like, oh yeah, we can complain about this because we know we can do something about it.
Yeah, because if you look back 10 years and you don't have this expectation that if I'm loud enough, this game's going to get changed. You go, this sucks, sell it, whatever. But now, because we live in that era, like you expect that the response from the studio now is going to be, fix my problem.
You hit on something very interesting. It goes back to your letter writing campaign. What role do you think the sales has to do in these kind of situations? Do you believe that if you purchase the game and do not like it, do you think you should return it? Or do you think that if you made it all the way through to the ending, it's kind of like finishing your whole meal at the restaurant?
If the steak sucks on the first bite, you can send it back. If you finish the steak, why did you finish the steak? This steak was terrible. I ate the whole thing.
Oh, this is awful.
How does every time
You made me eat this. I want my money back. I'm so dissatisfied.
Okay. I don't know who's been waiting for longest. I'm just going to start with you because you're a mother slime. That's awesome.
With the advent of crowdsourcing, and while creative input is not implicitly part of the...
Okay, stop right there for a second. Kevin, what's crowdsourcing?
Kickstarter.
Oh, okay, there we are.
Creative input is not implicitly part of the perks. Should the creators feel more obligated to include or listen to the fans more since it's crowdsourced?
I think because crowdsourcing or crowdfunding, whichever, I think there should be a frankness up front, where it's like, this is what your money's going to, this is the power it gives you. And as long as that's clearly stated, I don't think there's any obligation to allow creative control to others.
Right, and well, Kickstarter is a specifically difficult example now because I've read a few articles recently where finally Kickstarter projects that were kickstarted when the site was younger, some of them are just not happening. Like there are, you putting money into a funded Kickstarter does not guarantee that you are going to get exactly the thing that you thought you were buying. You might be buying a game that gets finished but is broken, sort of. You might be, buying a pen that's crappy, I don't know, whatever it is. But like I don't know, like the crowdfunding thing is, you should feel good about making the gesture toward helping the people without the expectation of getting the thing that is hopefully going to be the output.
And once that money's been given, it's gone. Like, as far as I know, there's no obligation through Kickstarter that if your project fails, even after you've received $50,000, that money has to be returned.
Right.
So like, it's a gesture, it's a show of faith, but like,
it's a show of faith.
Exactly, and you could get burned.
And so I guess crowdsourced funding, it's almost like you have even less rights because, I don't know, like it's almost like you're not doing the standard transaction that we think kind of entitles us to some sort of good experience from a trusted Better Business Bureau, company.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that have to be worked out with Kickstarters and crowdsourcing as that becomes a more popular way of getting things funded versus getting investors.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
A lot of the things you guys have been talking about are things that can be changed, like plot lines. How do you think that it changes when it's something that is part of the gameplay? Like, hypothetically, a dungeon crawling type on a game where you used to be able to play it online and now you have to play it online, and you can only use like so many potions per thing, and there's really bad lag, and this and this. How do you
She's talking about Diablo 3.
I'm still bitter.
I thought you were talking about even more mechanical, like Doom 3, where the game was, your mother pointed out how stupid that was, but when they changed it, they basically changed, the entire modality of the game. No, it's an excellent question. What do you guys think? Do you think it can extend that far? Do you think it should extend that far?
Blizzard is in a rough spot because they are attached to Activision, and they have to do some crappy things. It's just like they're as someone who's wearing a StarCraft hoodie and shirt, there have been, and who's been following that scene since it came out, there has been a lot of loud complaints about certain aspects of StarCraft, and obviously with Diablo 3, you have to be online to play this game thing made a lot of people very angry the day that came out because you couldn't get online because everyone was trying to. And Blizzard certainly knows, and they certainly seem to not care. It seems like a concession they're willing to make that, certain people are going to be unhappy that they have to be online, but that doesn't outweigh the money that we're going to rake in, which is unfortunate. Like there is a laundry list of things that people have been screaming for StarCraft 2 since day one that are only now, some of them are being implemented with Heart of the Swarm when it comes out. Like they have Blizzard has a glacial pace at making changes.
I don't want to bring up any more unhappy thoughts, but one of Blizzard's bread and butter is the esports community and the way that drives the way the games are developed. Can you talk a little bit about how that as a specific type of fan community exists?
It exists like any other community on the internet, But that's been kind of a bigger thing, is there's been sort of it seems like in esports, StarCraft 2 isn't taking up quite as much as War did in Korea, but I mean, what is going to? But just, I guess just in the face of like League of Legends or Dota, which have been taken up a lot faster, and there is some real problems with like StarCraft 2's, how it has to act as an esport that they've been very slow to address. Like the fact that you have to go out to Blizzard servers in order to play it. Like there's no LAN option, which obviously a lot of people are very upset about because they LAN parties are fun, but or being able to restart games halfway through, and the fact that Blizzard doesn't act on this has been a real pain in the ass for that industry, and hurts the legitimacy of it as a sport when you have to like deal with these technical problems for years now. That's just like, we just do this to make it a lot easier, but for whatever reason they just take their time with these things.
I think in a lot of ways, mechanical issues, they can make or break a game, and I think the responsibility of the developer in fixing mechanical issues is to make sure that the game does not become inaccessible or unbeatable because of it. Whereas a plot issue, like you can still progress through a plot and like a plot, but if the game is unplayable, you can't finish the game. In the case of like you were saying about Doom and like older survival horror games like original Silent Hill, Resident Evil, these games are notorious for sticky, bad control. But a large part of the tension that arises in that game is I don't want to deal with combat because it doesn't control well. I'll be more prone to die, and that becomes part of the feel of the game. Like again with like the flashlight and the gun. So like it's something to be watched.
Yes, sir. You had a question?
What you were just mentioning, like mechanical issues, to kind of tie that in with fan ownership of something. Say we take an example of Freelancer. It's a pretty good game, got released, didn't work on like half the video cards on the market, and Microsoft basically never did anything about it. And the community basically released a patch to fix the problems, and then Microsoft spontaneously shut down the server connection things. And again, the community came in, and since then it's released, huge patches of, mods and things, adding to the area and playability of the game, ships and all that stuff. At what point, it seems like it's been orphaned by the developer, and it's been kept
discuss.
Hearing all of that, what I immediately hear goes back to the original White Wolf World of Darkness, which has been kind of passed over by White Wolf. They've moved on. They're now doing the new World of Darkness, which is different rule set, different characters, and all of that. The old World of Darkness is still exceedingly popular amongst certain niche markets in the role-playing community, and you have people who are producing essentially entire core rule books for different aspects of the game and whatnot. And White Wolf has been asked about this, and they've unofficially, from what I understand, have said nothing, but a few people have gone off the record as saying, we think it's fantastic, so long as you're not selling the rule books and whatnot, you guys have at it and go forth with it. Once it kind of, not necessarily passes into public domain, but once it moves into this realm where the developer has walked away from it, I think it becomes the realm of fan fiction, where anything, you get to pick and choose what you like and don't like. But that's still kind of a fan-created art form at that point.
Well, I like both those examples a lot. I felt pretty strongly that if something is orphaned or abandoned before its time, when there's still an active community that wants it, and that if the people in charge are doing nothing to help it and aren't necessarily pursuing legal means to keep it under wraps or whatever, that one of the most heroic things a fan community can do is to save something like that, to keep something playable, to keep some servers up, to do whatever it is. And I think that's like a great illustration of where I think fans sort of deserve a kind of ownership of that, where they've made possible any ability to play it or deal with it.
If I throw out half my sandwich, and you come and pick that sandwich out of the garbage and eat it, I can't complain that you ate my sandwich.
Well, I think, you know, like, to continue to be positive, I think it's great how Capcom decided to pick up and, you know, kind of and distribute Street Fighter Cross Mega Man on their website, because, you know, they haven't done anything with Mega Man since Mega Man 10, which has had some people upset. It's like, you know, where's the Mega Man? But they're like, okay, well, there's this fan game, let's put it out there and see what people think. And then I guess the response has been pretty good, so they're like, well, maybe we can do more Mega Man. Maybe we can put more money into that. But at the same time, the fans need to be ready to give back to support the Mega Man that comes back at them. Because it probably won't be free.
Probably not. All right, we've got time for 2 more questions, and then we're going to have our closing statements. Lord, okay. You are on the other side of the room from what I've normally been calling, so I'm going to go ahead and go with you. Sorry, guys.
All right. Does BioWare's reaction to Mass Effect set a dangerous precedent for responding to the fans? I mean, they seem to respond positively to something so negative, and take a look at like Operation Rainfall, which was a positive fan reaction to try to get something that they wanted.
Hang on. Sorry.
I think it could have been, I was really worried that, like, because they didn't actually really make any huge changes to the ending, it was additive. I think that is okay. If they went back and were like, oh, we're going to do, you know, exactly what this, you know, conglomerate of fans wants, and just completely say they completely wiped out from like where, you know, Shepard gets blasted down before you go up on the Citadel. They just wiped out everything after when you go up on the Citadel. Completely. and completely, you know,
if you were going to play,
change everything. If they just completely ripped out like that last area of the game, completely changed that, had it completely different with all this other stuff going on, that would have, I think, set a really dangerous precedent like for games. But because they kept a lot of stuff that people didn't like intact, and we're like, you know, deal with it. It's our ending. You might not like how it plays out in relation to your story, but you know, here's a little bit more. Here, I hope this helps you. Like, I think that's all right.
It was a pretty small concession, and really all they were doing was expanding on their ideas, thus responding more to the people who were like, we just want more. And I think that was the best thing they could do in they were trying to embrace the most positive element of the negative reaction, which was, you know, game ends, we didn't get enough, we want more. And that's fine, I don't mind that. If they had responded most directly to the haters in the case of like totally changing things, again, that would be a really dangerous way to send the market.
I'm justified to think that it sets any sort of precedent. I was shocked when BioWare said that they were going to do this, especially being under the banner of EA. And I don't imagine a lot of other companies trying to do that type of thing in the future.
Yep.
I have a...
Excellent. Hold on there. Okay. Yes, you with the glasses.
You gentlemen, not this, sir.
It's a good question.
It sounds like, based on what you're saying, are you aware you're answering this question about fan reactions differently for video games as a medium than others? I know you brought up movies and Transformers and things, but do you think it's important to answer it about video games differently, given the medium and what it is? And also, given what you guys said about the time we're in and state of technology, do you think the way that they're made the way that games are made should change?
I think it is an important distinction. Again, kind of going back to how a film exists in different cuts, as opposed to what you have to do to a game to change it. I think that especially with games where you patch them or digitally get them augmented, that does yield a different set of considerations for me. Because I have an investment in this idea that, you know, I'm fine with both Mass Effect 3 the way it was and the way it is now, because it's nice that that it can exist in those two contrasting states yet still be accessible. But it's the way that some companies and owners try to, you know, obliterate all traces the Lucas way or whatever it is. That's what gets me, because I like the option. So But I think with video games, it is an important distinction, because the way that you change a video game differs from the way that you change these other things.
Yeah, I think it's super important for video games as a medium, because there is already like a huge challenge with video games in how do you preserve them for the future, especially with like old arcade machines that run on something proprietary, but then and you don't have any kind of standardized player for them. It's like movies will always, you know, they can get lost, yes, but it's just like there's usually one format at a time, whereas games are multiple formats, and then those formats can get changed by patches, DLC, and just other things that will influence the experience. Like, how do you have that full experience of like Mass Effect 3 10 years from now? Or something like Dragon Age the First, that's something really stuck out with me, is that there is a dude who is in your camp who is trying to get you to buy the DLC. It's like, how does that play 10, 20 years in the future, where it's like, where do you even get it from? Like okay, and so you kind of lose out on having a complete experience if it's not all there to begin with. Like, where is your patch server in the year 2025 to update some broken ass part of your game? I mean, I'm sure, you know, people will figure it out, but it's like, how much should games change after the fact? It is, you know, something that should be, you know, kind of addressed as
all right, you've been very patient, dude. Yes.
So you guys are a film production crew or a game development team, whatever it is. When you realize that your franchise has reached this critical mass of popularity and you can't deliver the ending that lives up to the hype, how do you deal with that?
You kill it.
You just drop it.
Gold Yeller.
I would do something like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where it's a terrible ending, but it's also kind of fitting, right? It's like both, it's a terrible ending that masks how little money they have, but it's also clever, and they know that they can't please everybody, so they try to just do something memorable. I don't know. That would be my excuse. And then people ask, I'd say, oh, I'm just doing the Monty Python the Holy Grail thing. If people like that movie enough, they'd be like, oh, okay.
Nothing else, at least please yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it's masturbatory in a way, but it's like. It's indulgent to a point, but like, if nothing else, at least you're making a product that you can stand by and be happy with. Even if you know it's not what everyone was expecting and it's not perfect, you can at least be like, you know, I made the thing I loved, I couldn't do any better than that. The worst thing you can do is just be like, well, I'll try to please everybody at once, and in doing so, please nobody enough, you know?
I add on to that, if you guys don't mind. One thing that I would come at is that if you reach the point of critical mass, you should already know how you're going to end it. That should be determined a long time ago.
True.
And so, in which case, kind of like you guys are saying, you just stick with your plan. And if people don't like it, you know, you kind of say, this is where we were going from the beginning. But yeah. All right, guys. Final closing thoughts on this subject. Bobby.
If you don't like something about a game, remember that there are tons of other games to play instead.
Too many, apparently.
Too many games.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't like it, just move on. Like, don't ruin it for everybody else.
Just because the last bite of the steak was mostly rib doesn't mean that it wasn't ribeye!
If you truly love something, then set it free.
Writing an online petition is one step above writing a letter to Santa. If you really want your voice to be heard, actually go to the website and fill out one of their "we want to hear from you," or send them an actual email, because somebody is paid to read every single one of those. Whether that person is listened to or not is another matter, but they have a forum to hear from you, and many times they do want to hear from you, especially if it's constructive and not full of, you know, vile hatred. But, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for coming to our panel.
Yeah, thank you.
And once again, our esteemed colleagues,